Hello.
This is a shorter I think they're both short. I had that happen before. I went to the wrong place for a test, and I was like, I couldn't find it, and there was no one around, and I didn't, that was before all the cell phones. I think I don't know what happened, but I was crying and I was very upset. I think I finally found it. Dream about not what you're supposed to do in real life.
I used to have the street a lot. Then I had to study for this.
Right. Yeah.
Very upsetting.
It is, yeah.
Finally went away. I think when school finally went away.
Well, we dream about it tonight.
Not really.
Rosalie, that looks nice and warm, your coat.
It is.
Nowadays, I mean, like my friend has one that's so light, it doesn't even look like it would make her warm, but it does.
This is a London fog,
Is it?
and it has a line in it.
Slip out
Very
liner.
good, yeah.
And I've had it for, you wouldn't believe it, but
London
20
fogs
years or
last
so.
forever.
I don't know if they make coats like this anymore. I guess they do.
Yes, they do.
See?
Yeah, I don't have London fog, but I have two coats that length going up to my ankles, and they both have
That's nice. I have
liners.
two long woolen coats. Too heavy. When it's really cold out. Keep my head.
It's pretty cold. This is cold for LA. Wow. High
Yeah,
of
I saw
50.
the mountains were beautiful.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But the
do.
I have so much food in my refrigerator now. So I think we might have too far north.
Yeah, it looks like it. A little bit.
They would have domes and clothes.
Yeah.
Actually,
Okay.
I was looking at pictures of that.
So it's right in the area of where Sinai connects to Egypt. Okay.
Yeah.
Super.
So if you want to plug this, or put it back.
No, you can put it down. Thank you. That helps.
We're gonna look up odd quiz. We look up odd quizzes. And we have a question for you. It's multiple choice. It has those singing, so I thought maybe it would know it.
No, well, but we don't understand the answer.
What is the answer?
The blessing of the moon.
Okay, good. I was actually thinking because Siman and Mazal. So what is a Siman? A Siman is a sign, and Mazal is a constellation. So when we say Mazal Tov, we're saying may you find yourself under a good constellation.
Okay. Because we thought, when you said naughty, we thought of that. Like,
The others didn't seem to make sense.
well, I knew it wasn't physical.
But I was between, because it's not pleasant. I was sort of between, I don't know. But good, thank you. I didn't know that.
So what's the reason? Constellation?
Siman is a sign that Mazel is a constellation.
Constellation. So you're talking about the heavens. You're talking about
Which is the constellation?
Mazel.
Mazal.
Mazal. This is a really stupid question. You want to see it?
Our other microphone person isn't here today, Ernie.
Oh, Ernie's not here.
I just said that.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to make a brief announcement. Nothing urgent, though. It's just that our microphone has a shorter cord, so if you want to make a comment, you'll probably have to come up here or shout, whatever you want to do. Anybody hear me? You couldn't hear me? I just said that the cord here is very short. I can't reach everybody. So if you want to make a comment, you have two choices. Either you can come up here, use a mic, or start shouting.
Or don't
So
make
I'm-
your comment.
Or number 3, or don't make your comment. Good morning, Rabbi. No, what was it? Oh, I'm sorry. Did they send it?
I don't know. That was my question.
We'll follow up on it. We've had changes in that.
Okay. Welcome back, Joanne.
Thank you, thank you. It was kind of like, welcome to Morocco. Jews used to live here, Jews used to live here, Jews used to live here.
So that's where you were?
Yeah.
Oh, well, tell us. Joette just got back from an incredible vacation, and actually, you said to Morocco. Okay, Morocco's going to figure a little bit into our discussion today. So tell us about Morocco.
So, as I just mentioned to the rabbi, we get there and each tour guide is, welcome to Morocco. Jews used to live here. Jews used to live here. And every city we went to, Jews used to live here. And they would take us to the Medina, which is the old city, and then to the Mullah, which is the Jewish quarter within the old city. And there was always a synagogue or two, Rambam's house, things of that nature, which indicated that Jews used to live there. The other unusual thing is I was on a kosher tour, and there were several kosher restaurants in various cities, even though Jews aren't really there anymore, except in Casablanca. And the restaurants exist for the tourists. There was even one city where we went, I think it was in Rabat, where it's a woman who invites tourist groups into her home, and she cooks, and that's how she makes her living, is on kosher tours coming in. So it was definitely welcoming. I mean, they kept saying, isn't it wonderful, Jews and Muslims can coexist together. But when they gave the history, they kind of left out the 1948 part. Absolutely. But other than that, it was very interesting. The Arab architecture was prevalent, of course, and so it was wonderful to see it.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
So we went to Morocco, and one thing you didn't mention,
Okay, relax. He's coming up now.
Nervous breakdown. It's too early in the morning. I'll talk later.
Okay, he's going to talk later. He's got choking a little bit on some nuts, dry mouth. Okay, so we started last week talking about Egypt, and we got through a lot of the ancient history of Egypt, and we left off at the Middle Ages and the emergence of Islam on the scene. And Islam emerges in the world around when? 600, right? Actually, it's 630, but 600 is easy to remember, so I always use easy to remember dates, and that gets us, 600 Islam. So Islam emerges on the scene around 600. And as just a very quick refresher from the end of last week, when Muhammad first emerges on the scene and he has this new revelation that he receives, and for this new religion, updated religion called Islam, which we all know means submission. And at first, Muhammad doesn't have a problem with the Jews at all, because we are the closest religion there is to monotheism, and we have no images of God. We have nothing like that. So, and that's what Islam taught as well. So Muhammad said, "Oh, these guys are pretty good. Okay, we like that." He was very suspicious about the Christians because of the Trinity and because of the worshiping of the saints. And he was also accepting of the Zoroastrians. And so what happened was then Muhammad conveyed his revelations to the elders of the Jewish community, because his thought was, well, when I tell them about this new religion that's very much like theirs, they're just going to come over to our side and they're going to embrace us and they're going to convert. And once again, we talked last week, the revelations that Muhammad brought were similar, kind of, but changed the story a lot. Abraham and Isaac, the Akedah, Isaac isn't there, it's Ishmael. And so the elders in the Jewish community were dumbfounded. That's a nice way to say it. They were like, excuse me? What? No, this isn't the story. This isn't the story at all. I don't know what you've done, but this is not the story. And Muhammad would come back, well, I have this new revelation. This is the story. No, this is not the story. Yes, this is the story. Okay. Enough said. So there was became a lot of friction between Islam and Judaism. And in subsequent years, as we know, things became worse and worse and worse. So in 600, Islam comes on the scene, and over a course of a fairly short time, begins to conquer all the territory around it. She's coming, she's coming.
So who are the people who do convert to Islam? It's not the Jews, so who are they?
So who are the people who do convert to Islam? Very good question. Some Jews did. By far, the vast majority did not. Same thing with Christians. Some did, the vast majority did not. So who is left in what we now call the Middle East, in Turkey, in Northern Africa? Who would be left? If you're not Christian, if you're not Jewish, if you're not already Muslim, what are you? Non-believer? Nomads? Or pagans? Or you believed in different gods? Yes, any combination of those three. Those were the people who were left. So when Muhammad and Islam goes out to conquer the lands, they go after pagans, they go after non-believers, they go after nomads, they go after everyone who isn't Islam, Jewish, or Christian. Muslim, Jewish, or Christian. Okay. Muhammad leaves the Jews alone for the most part, and he leaves the, I shouldn't say Muhammad. The rules are set up in subsequent leaders of Islam under Umar. And Umar sets up what we call the Pact of Umar. And this is going to influence Jewish-Muslim relations up until the State of Israel. And again, the Pact of Umar says that basically Jews should be tolerated as people of the book, and they have a written tradition already, and they're pure monotheists, so they should be tolerated. Tolerated means don't go out and kill them, right? It means just sort of let them do their thing, as long as they keep a low profile both in what they say and also in what they do. Remember, we said that, for instance, a Jewish person couldn't be riding a horse next to a Muslim person who was walking. So, kept a low profile, meaning no fancy celebrations for Purim, no fancy celebrations for Sukkot, no big loud things, no new synagogues. Whatever synagogue you have has to be lower in stature than any mosque. And as long as the Jews sort of kept to themselves and just did their thing, by and large, they were left alone. There were incidents, for sure, of problems, but by and large, it was sort of okay. The Pact of Umar was either strictly enforced or enforced with a great deal of laxity, depending on which caliph of the country was brought into power. Under certain caliphs, it was more strict. Under others, it was more lax. Okay, what does that have to do with Egypt? Well, the first set of caliphs, the Fatimid caliphs, reigned from 969 to 1169. That's only 200 years. And when they take over, there are a number of North African Jews, Morocco, Tunisia, etc., who come to Egypt and they settle in Egypt in 969. How do we know that? We know that because of an incredible find in the late 19th century called the Cairo Geniza. Tell me something about the Cairo Geniza. Who knows something about the Cairo Geniza? Joette? It was discovered in the attic of a synagogue.
And it contained documents and books and other materials from Jewish communities over several centuries.
Good. It contained documents from Jewish communities over several centuries. Okay. Very good. What is a geniza? Good. A place where you bury all of the material that has God's name on it. So now, if I have documents that I need to dispose of that has God's name on it, I take them to either Mount Sinai or Grove in Eden, and they have a place where they bury these documents. Because our tradition says that it is not okay to destroy a document with God's name on it. So that's a geniza. So in the Ben Ezra synagogue of Cairo, it was discovered first actually in around the 1750s that there were some documents there. These documents range from the 6th to the 19th centuries. Huge time period of all kinds of documents, religious documents, but also documents from merchants, all kinds of letters and fragments of documents that give a very good glimpse into what life was like in Cairo for Jews. It was reported first in 1752, but it wasn't really acted on until 1896 with Solomon Schechter. Solomon Schechter is a giant, an absolute giant in the conservative movement. A lot of schools named after him, absolutely. So Solomon Schechter is a very, very, very important person in our tradition. And he realizes, when he sees these fragments, he realizes what they are, and he goes to Cairo, and he begins to get the documents out, to translate them, to make a better picture of what life was like for Jews. Those documents from the Cairo Geniza now are spread among many different museums in the world. Okay. In 1996, Caliph al-Hakim comes to power, and he vigorously enforces the Pact of Umar. So remember, I told you some caliphs were more lenient, some caliphs were more strict. Al-Hakim was very strict. At the time, there were about, in 996 approximately, there were about 90 Jewish communities in Egypt. These were small communities. And by the 11th and 12th century, There numbered maybe 4,000 to 6,000 Jews, somewhere like that. There were about 2,000 in Cairo and about 3,000 in Alexandria, and then a few more in other communities. And so we're talking about 996 right now. So we have to get a little bit of an idea about what's going on in the world. So remember that Islam had conquered Jerusalem in 636, 300 years before 969. Jerusalem was under Muslim control. That's going to be crucial to part of our discussion in a moment. 636. Okay. What happens next, obviously, are the Crusades. And the Crusades start around 1100 CE. And what was the purpose of the Crusades? Take back Jerusalem. That's right. Can everybody understand when I'm repeating the question and answering it? Yes? Yes. Okay, good. So, the Pope Urban II initiates the First Crusade to take back Jerusalem from the infidels, from the Muslims. In a lot of ways, Urban II was simply trying to solidify support for himself. And so what he did is he went to the knights, the aristocracy, and he said, look, I got a thing here. Let's do it. And you can imagine, I mean, life in the Middle Ages wasn't so exciting. You know, people died from an infected tooth. You died early. What did you do? You worked your garden, you worked your fields. Maybe you had some kind of mercantile or textile business or some kind of craft business. You went home to your wife and kids, and then you did the same thing the next day, every single day. There were no movies. There were no, So when Pope Urban II, hey, I have this great idea. Let's go on an adventure. And the knights are like, yeah, let's do that. That sounds great. And so they get all set up, ready to go, and they start marching towards Jerusalem. And as they go through town after town, they're telling the people, hey, we're going to Jerusalem. We're going to get it back from, yeah. And so lots of people got on board, and they all went. Well, we know that religious fervor became an awful thing for Jewish communities, because as these knights and all the people from the various villages started marching through cities, especially along the Rhine River in Germany, where there were a number of Jewish communities, it's like, look, we can't wait for this infidel stuff. Let's go after the Jews. And so many Jewish communities were destroyed, Jews were slaughtered, Jews committed mass suicide to escape being put to death by them. And so the Crusades are as we all know, a particularly difficult time for Jews and for Jewish communities. That's what's happening in Europe as it's making its way to Jerusalem. What happens is that the Crusaders retake Jerusalem. Okay? There is a rule, basically, in traditional Islam that says, if a land comes under Muslim control, and then it comes out of Muslim control, it must be returned to Muslim control. Okay, think Israel right now, right? Because Israel is under Muslim control starting in 630. Now, the the caveat to that is, well, what about Spain? Spain was under Muslim control for a long time. Why isn't Spain in that equation? Israel's in that equation. Spain somehow is, okay. So, yes, Susie. Spain is a lot bigger than Israel. Okay, maybe that's why. Maybe also Islam understands that Spain, if it's attacked, is going to, there are a number of nations that will immediately come to its defense, unlike Israel. So, I mean, there are a number of reasons. But the whole point is, if a land used to be Muslim and it's not anymore, it has to be returned to Islam. Okay. So the Crusades happen in 1100. Saladin, who is the emperor, who is the caliph, starting in 1169, that's 69 years after the First Crusade, then attacks Jerusalem and reclaims it for Islam. Now, there are going to be a number of subsequent crusades, as we all know. The first one is the biggest. But then there are 2, 3, 4, 5 crusades which attempt to do the same thing that the first one did and to try to get Jerusalem back. What ends up happening is Jerusalem stays under Islamic control. So Saladin's war against the Crusaders, which is 1169 to 1193, it is right around this time that Maimonides flees to Egypt. First he was in Morocco, then but he started in Spain. And a group of fanatic Muslim invaders called the Almohads take over Spain and beyond strictly enforce the Pact of Umar. What they say is Jews convert or die. So Maimonides flees. He goes to northern Africa and then ultimately to Egypt, where he becomes Saladin's personal physician. What do we know, because this is so important, I want to take just a moment. What do we know about Maimonides? He's such an important figure in our tradition. When you hear the name Maimonides, who is he? Philosopher, physician, wrote the Guide for the Perplexed. Born in Spain, moved to Morocco, moved to Egypt, died in Egypt. Okay, very good. Very good. Anyone else? Okay. Maimonides is probably the single most important medieval philosopher that we have in Judaism, period. Yes, in fact, he did write the Mishneh Torah, which was the first attempt at taking all the laws that are found in the Talmud and putting them in a shorter form. So, if you want to find out what does Jewish law say about, you look in the Talmud. And the Talmud will have lots and lots and lots of discussions among the rabbis about what the law is. Now, that's a very tedious undertaking, and many people at that time didn't know how to read. So it's very difficult. What Maimonides said was, you know what, let's just say what the law is, and we'll leave out all these discussions. It's like reading a whole bunch of Supreme Court briefs. It's like, just tell me what the law is. So Maimonides writes the Mishneh Torah, and it is a codification of the laws of the Talmud. And it's a very, very important work, but it too was not short. It was very long. And the Jewish authorities disliked it a lot. Why did the Jewish authorities dislike it? Because Maimonides didn't give any citations or proofs. He just said, this is the law. So the Jewish authorities said, look, I'm sorry, you don't have any, you don't have any corroboration for this, you don't have any citations, you don't have any footnotes, you don't have anything in here. No, we're not okay with this. There are two other attempts along the way to codify Jewish law. The second one is called the Arba Turim, the 4 posts. And the third one, which is the most important one for us as modern Jews, is called the Shulchan Aruch. These were codified in the 1500s. Joseph Caro lived around 1500. The Shulchan Aruch is very important. Why? Because Orthodox Jews use it to determine what the law is. So today, right this very minute, if an Orthodox Jew has a question about the law, he or she goes to the Shulchan Aruch, written in 1500, and to look to see what Jewish law says on a certain subject. What do we do about things that happen after 1500 that need clarifying in the law? Can you take a breathing tube out? What do you do, when someone is brain dead? Are they really dead? These are questions that ultimately go to responsa. In other words, you ask modern rabbis and they give you a modern interpretation. But the Shulchan Aruch is very important. So Maimonides writes the Mishnah Torah, which is the first of these codifications, as well as the Guide for the Perplexed, which is what Joette said. The Guide for the Perplexed is sort of a layman's guide to what should I know about being Jewish? Maimonides was very erudite, so even you want to read it and it's like, wow, okay, this is this is not easy reading. Okay. Now, the reason why I was so insistent on talking about dates especially when it comes to Jerusalem, is so Jerusalem is under Islamic control from 636 to, let's say, 1948. Okay? After we all know after World War I, you have the British mandate. The British are in control of the government, but Muslims are still the dominant population in Jerusalem. This is how long Islam controls Jerusalem. So that's about 1,312 years. How long did we have it? Well, if we go to King David up to Islam, that's 1,000 plus 600, 1,600. So what's important for us to know here is that Islam controlled Jerusalem almost as long as we did. So you can intellectually then understand, okay, the Islamic argument, it's ours. They had it last, and they controlled it for almost as long as we did. Now, I'm not at all, no, I'm not at all saying that they should have it in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying, as intelligent adults, we have to understand the argument and appreciate the argument. And we can say, okay, look, all right, I see your point, but no. No.
So my theory is who controls the land is the group that has the power to control the land.
Good. Gary says, my theory is that he who controls the land has the power to control the land. We know this is how the world works.
Absolutely.
Right? Putin goes in and he takes Crimea. He just takes it. The world says nothing. The world does nothing. Who owns Crimea right now? Russia. I mean, it's a fact of life. When people take over land, they then are the rulers of the land. Now, remember, that's not exactly what happened in Israel. Because in 1947, before Israel becomes a state, in 1947 there was a UN partition plan. The UN decided to partition Israel and give some of it to the Jews and some of it to the Arabs. So it was a little bit different in that situation. But I just want to point out, as intelligent people, they had it almost as long as we had it. And so we won't agree with their argument, but we can understand it a little. So, after Saladin in 1250, we have the Mamluks. And the Mamluks are another group of Muslims, and they adhere mostly to Sufism. Does anyone know what Sufism is? Sufism is a branch of Islam very much like Kabbalah. They're the mystical group within Islam. They are, in general, less traditional, less fundamental, less strict. I don't know if strict is the right word. Less rigid, maybe, less confrontational. But Sufism within Islam in modern times, the Sufis are looked at as, by traditional Muslims, as no. They're too easy. They embrace a form of Islam that goes against the tradition, whereas we as Jews welcome Kabbalah. It may not be our thing, but we welcome it into the spectrum of what is Jewish. So would you compare that to Reform? No, I would not say that, no. Sufism is just like Kabbalah. In fact, they are very, very, very similar. Sufism and Kabbalah. So if you are a Jewish mystic, meaning one who embraces the Kabbalah, that is your expression of Judaism. And there are lots of Jews who are into Kabbalah. Then you are a mystical Jew. All it means is that your ideas about God, your ideas about how the universe was created, how evil came into the world, what our purpose is, how God expresses himself here among us, etc., are shaped by mystical thought, which is different from traditional rabbinical thought. It's different, right? In Kabbalah, we know God is divided into masculine energies and feminine energies. And God's masculine energies reside in the heavens as HaKadosh Baruch Hu. God's feminine energies reside among us as a Shekhinah. And we experience God through various emanations called the Sephirot. Grace, loving kindness, these kinds of things. Okay, so that would be a mystic, and that would be equivalent to the Sufis. And the Mamluks were embraced in general Sufi Islam. And at the time, there was a Jew in the community. His name was Abraham Maimonides, no relation to Maimonides. And his solution to the situation was to tell the Jewish communities that they should sort of rework the school system so that it resembles more of the Sufi school system in order to fit in better with the population. Does that ring a bell for anyone? Who else did that? Moses Mendelssohn is going to do that in the late 1700s and give rise ultimately to the Reform movement. Moses Mendelssohn in the 1700s says, Jews, you want to be citizens of this country. These people don't like you. The citizens here don't like you. Why? You separate yourselves from everybody. You eat special food. You wear special clothes. You don't want to be a part of them. Why should they want you to be a part of the country? If you want to be citizens here and get your civil rights, own land, etc., you're going to have to make some concessions. You know, start dressing like them a little bit. Don't worry so much about the food you eat. Relax. And then they, in turn, will like you, and they will invite you to become citizens. That's the whole basis for the origins of the Reform movement, starting in the late 1700s. Okay, so Abraham Maimonides says, you know, we should make our schools a little more like the Sufi schools. We can fit in a little bit more. There won't be any tension between the communities. Everyone will be happy. Well, once the Ottomans take over in 1517, it's very interesting because Isaac Luria, who is probably the single most prominent figure in Jewish mysticism in the Kabbalah, visits Cairo. Oh, that's kind of interesting, where he may have been exposed to Sufism and where some of his ideas may have coalesced with some of the Sufi ideas. But the Ottoman Empire in general was known basically for tolerance for the Jews. Starting in 1919, Egypt in general is pretty friendly to Jews. There were about 80,000 refugees from Europe fleeing the pogroms, started with the assassination of Tsar Alexander II in 1881. We've seen this over and over and over. There was, at the time, a lot of tension between the Karaite and the Rabbinite communities. Remember, we talked about the Karaites. They are a group of Jews who do not believe in what the rabbis say. They only believe in what the written word says. And of course, rabbinical Jews believe in what the rabbis say the written text say. So the Karaites, along with the Samaritans, probably are the only two fundamentalist movements we have. And we might also add, especially in light of the recent days, the West Bank settlers. They adhere to what our written texts say. This land is ours, we're going to take it. It's a very dangerous situation right now. Very, very dangerous and volatile. But other than that, we don't have fundamentalist Jews. Doesn't exist. Everyone else is a rabbinical Jew who follows more or less what the rabbis tell us our written texts say. Fundamentalism means you only accept what the written text says. And so between the Karaite and the Rabbinite communities, there was no intermarriage. They lived in two separate adjoining communities. Starting in 1936, 1930 to 1939, we know there are a lot of Arab clashes with the Jews. There weren't a huge number of Zionists there at the time, but we know that there was a close relationship between Hitler and the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. So tensions were beginning to build, and at the same time we have the starting in the late 1800s, the waves of aliyot from Eastern Europe into Israel. And these Jews were coming from Eastern Europe saying, hey, we're going to work our homeland. We're going to build this up. And the Muslims who are there, who are the dominant population, see them coming in. You're going to work your what? Your homeland? No, I don't think so. The land belongs to us. It's ours. No, sorry, thank you, but no. And of course, more Jews came, and more Jews came, and more Jews came. Starting in 1942, there are pogroms. And, of course, the 1947 partition made things much, much, much worse. And a lot of this was a result of Zionism. And we know that the idea of establishing a Jewish homeland, which Theodor Herzl, had proposed in the late 1800s, 1897, and the early 1900s, was directly against what Islam was saying. The equation is really very simple if you look at it. When Islam was the dominant population in Jerusalem, there was no problem. As long as there were more Muslims than there were Jews, no problem. The moment that the Jews were seen as becoming the dominant population, everything changed. Because obviously that would change the entire complexion of the city, voting, etc., in the same way that Israel right now is faced with a huge problem. If you allow the Palestinian population to vote, at some point you are going to completely dilute or overpower the Jewish vote. And then what happens? Then Israel does not become a Jewish state anymore. And it was founded as a Jewish state. So it's a very big problem. So in 1948, there were about 75,000 Egyptian Jews. There were bombings, and many of the Egyptian Jews left. By 1950, 40% of the entire Jewish population of Egypt had gone abroad. Some to Israel, some to other countries. And it was at the same time, as we well know, during the War for Independence, that Jews were forcibly kicked out and their property confiscated from Morocco, Iran, Turkey, Yemen, Iraq. Not so from mostly Egypt was left on their own. And at the same time that Jews were kicked out of a number of Arab Muslim countries, Israel kicked out a number of Arab Muslims from Israel.
Didn't a lot of the Arabs leave from
Yes.
Israel voluntarily because
Yes.
they were terrified for their own safety?
Didn't a lot of Arabs leave from Israel because they were terrified for their own safety? First part of that's correct. A lot did leave on their own, but not because they were terrified, because the Arab nations said, we are getting ready to attack. Get the heck out of there, and when we flatten Israel, you can go back to your homes. So they left under the impression that Israel was going to be destroyed. Well, we know how that worked out, and then they couldn't go back. So there was a population exchange in 1948 approximately. Arabs were kicked out of Israel, Jews were kicked out of all the Arab countries. And that's just how it is. War is hell. You do what you have to do. So I'll finish with this today. So in 2009, anti-Semitism was still very high in Egypt. In 2007, there were about 200 Jews in Egypt. In 2014, there were 40 Jews. In 2017, there were 18 Jews. In 2018, there were 10 Jews. And the last count in 2022, there were 3 Jewish women in Egypt. You know what? I don't know what they're doing there. They're
probably very old.
they're probably very old. Yeah, yeah. But this is great because the history of Jews in Egypt has such a long, vast history, and I'm glad we were able to take 2 classes to sort of go through both the history and the history surrounding the population, as well as the population itself. In the only country I think right now that is enjoying a resurgence is Morocco, because last I recall, Morocco allowed some flights from Israel, and Israel allowed some flights from Morocco, and it was a wonderful day because there are a number of Moroccan Jews in Israel who hadn't been back to Morocco in years and years and years and years and years and years and years, and they were finally able to go back to see their family and friends.
Some of the people on the tour I was on came from Israel, and they flew directly from Israel to Morocco.
Some of the people who were on the tour that Joette was on flew directly from Israel to Morocco. Yes. I thought Israel and Egypt had a relationship. Yes. Yes. Tourists. Yes. And I would say, when we say Israel and Egypt have a relationship, I think they have a truce, for sure. And they have a understanding. They have a tolerance, a mutually cooperative relationship. But it's not like a, hey, guys, what's going on kind of relationship. But yes, they have diplomatic relations, they have a truce, and they have some exchange of... And they work a lot together for mutual security.
But Israelis go to Egypt for tourism, and Egyptians don't come to Israel for tourism.
Very good. So Israelis go to Egypt for tourism, but by and large, Egyptians do not go to Israel for the same reason. Okay, last comment. Yeah, but you have to come up and tell it.
My daughter, Jody, and son-in-law, Brian, live in Jerusalem. Since their kids they have a 5-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a third child born in Israel. So when the 5-year-old, I think he was about 12, his name is Amir, the 3 kids, they wanted to go to Egypt in the worst way. And all their friends said, do not go to Egypt. They hate Israelis. This is back, he's 31 now, so it's 12, when he was 12. So that many years ago. They hate Israelis. Do not go there. And they thought about it, and they decided they are going to go. But they will use their American passports. They even thought about changing their 3 kids' names, Amir, Meirav, and Aviv. But they didn't. They had a wonderful guide. They saw everything. They were very delighted with everything. Brian is a writer, Brian Blum, and he came back and he wrote this article about their trip. The article was not accepted by his, what would you call it? What? Publisher. Yeah, by his publisher, because they wanted him to let the guy know that they were actually Israelis. And by the way, when they were there and they heard the name Amir, wait a minute, that's an Arab name. Are you sure you're not Arab? No, but remember, they didn't know that they were Israeli. So he writes the guy, no, not the publisher. He writes to the tour guide, and he says, well, I'm going to tell you the truth. The truth is, we came there with our American passports, but we're actually Israelis. So he waits 2 weeks, and he finally gets an answer, and the guy goes, well, as long as you're Israelis, when your friends come, could you please have them bring me some Israeli cigarettes?
Cute. So, Rabbi, when we went to Cairo, that was about 6-7 years ago, we took a tour of the remaining Jewish synagogue in Cairo, and it was run by the Coptic Christians.
Oh. What, on Gary's last trip to Cairo, the last remaining synagogue was run by Coptic Christians. Yeah. All right, everyone, have a beautiful week.
You should have a beautiful week as well. Hi, everybody. You get an opportunity to get your snacks, and then we're going to walk to the room that is the Wynn, which is, if you're walking from here and you're looking on the right, after you go past the memorial walkway, it's the first room on your right, and that's where we're going to be meeting, because I've set up the PowerPoint there for today, and hopefully those of you who are at home, please go to the other option for linking in for Zoom, and I'm trying to get PowerPoint, FaceTime, Zoom. Please log into the Zoom information that you received from Susie, and we'll continue with our classes. It's fine, take a few minutes to grab what you want. I think that
Yeah, grab your coffee and tea and goodies. It's all right, you can eat in the Wynn room.